You ever flip your phone over and see that little phrase, "Made in China"? For a long, long time, that meant, well, you know what it meant. But what if I told you that's all changed? That today, that same phrase tells one of the most surprising and honestly one of the most important stories in all of tech.
All right, so let's just lay it all out there. On one hand, you've got the old idea, right? The stereotype. Made in China, that just means cheap, a knockoff. But the reality, the real story today, we're talking about genuine innovation. We're talking about a global tech hub. The big question is, how in the world did we get from that old idea to this new reality?
So, to really get it, we have to go back to the beginning. Let's start with where that whole reputation even came from. We're talking about the copycat era, and you'll see how, weirdly enough, it actually set the stage for a massive tech revolution.
And look, let's be honest, that whole cheap knockoff idea didn't come from nowhere. If you go back a couple of decades to the early 2000s, the market was flooded, absolutely flooded with phones that were, basically clones of popular models. They looked the part, but they were way cheaper, and yeah, they often weren't great. That's really our starting point.
Okay, so from that starting point, things began to shift. This is the part of the story where simple imitation starts to turn into something way, way bigger. It's the moment a country of manufacturers starts to become a country of innovators. And trust me, this is where it gets really good.
And this timeline? Wow. It just lays out how incredibly fast this all happened. You see, we start in the early 2000s with that knockoff market we talked about. But then just a few years later, boom, you get the rise of these powerful homegrown brands. Fast forward to the 2010s and companies you've definitely heard of like Xiaomi and Huawei, they're not just playing the game anymore, they're going global. And today, it's a whole new ballgame. They're literally leading the pack in things like 5G and creating these wild new phone designs.
Okay, so this brings us to what I think is the most important part of this whole story. Because China isn't just making its own phones anymore. No, it's become the smartphone factory for the entire world. And the hidden truth behind how that happened? Yeah, I think it's gonna surprise you.
So let me just ask you straight up. Think about the biggest, most premium phones out there, the ones from the big American or South Korean brands. Where do you actually think they get built? The answer to that question is a massive piece of this entire puzzle.
Well, here's the thing. Your iPhone, assembled in China by absolute giants like Foxconn. Google's Pixel phones? Yep, put together there too. And even Samsung, a South Korean powerhouse, relies on Chinese factories for a ton of its key parts. It's not an exaggeration to say that China has become the literal beating heart of the entire global smartphone industry.
So you gotta ask, why? Why China? And it really boils down to three key things. First, just the sheer scale of it all. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're talking about entire cities that are basically built around making electronics. Second, the supply chain is just insanely efficient. It's like a perfectly choreographed dance. Parts get from one factory to another in a matter of hours, not days. And third, you have massive government investment that's built up the roads, the ports, the whole infrastructure to make this machine run.
All right, now it's time to tackle the biggest myth of all, the one we really need to bust. And that's the idea that a lower price tag has to mean lower quality. Because this, right here, is where the story has completely flipped on its head.
Just look at this comparison. If you grab a typical mid-range phone from a brand like, say, Redmi or Realme, you're often getting stuff that used to be only for super expensive phones. Like a beautiful AMOLED screen, the ones with those amazing vibrant colors, or a really high-end camera, or charging that's so fast your phone is full before you finished your coffee. These are top-tier features, but for way, way less money. It's a total redefinition of what value for money even means.
And the key thing here is, they're not achieving this by using cheap parts or bad designs. It's all about something called economies of scale. They're making so many of these phones that the cost for each one just plummets. Plus, their whole business model is different. Instead of spending billions on flashy TV ads, they build online communities and let word of mouth do the work. It's just a smarter, leaner way of doing things, and that saving gets passed on to you.
Now we have to be balanced here. It's not a perfect story. There are absolutely some valid concerns you should know about. Data privacy has been a big question for some of these brands. You might remember back in 2019, the US government actually put Huawei on a trade blacklist over security risks. And sometimes, with the really budget-friendly models, you might not get software updates as consistently as you'd like. So these are definitely real issues to consider. So, when you put all of this together, what's the big picture? Well, it seems like we've arrived at a totally new global standard. A point where that Made in China label means something completely different. We're not just talking about a country that makes things, we're talking about the new center of gravity for the entire tech world.
Here's the bottom line. Made in China isn't really about geography anymore. It's a label that stands for capability. It represents this incredible, massive ecosystem that has the skill, the size, and the sheer efficiency to build the technology that, let's face it, pretty much runs our daily lives now.
And you don't have to look far to see that capability in action. It's happening right now. These companies aren't just keeping up with trends anymore. They're the ones setting them. They're at the forefront of the 5G rollout, they're doing amazing things with AI in their cameras, and they're pushing the boundaries with futuristic stuff like foldable phones. They're leading the pack.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. The next time you flip over your phone, or any gadget really, and you see Made in China, I hope you'll think about this whole journey, from copycat to global innovator. Don't let your first thought be cheap. Instead, think crafted at the absolute center of the modern tech world. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're holding an iPhone, a Pixel, or a Xiaomi. You're holding a device that was born from that incredibly powerful, globe-spanning ecosystem.
Thanks for diving into this with me.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe!